This is Michael Tellinger, and I'd like to take a journey of discovery with you to look into the ancient past and see what kind of wisdom we can pick up from the ancient civilizations. Wisdom and information and knowledge that we could possibly put to the use of humankind today and into the future. I've been traveling around the world and doing these lectures on the origins of humankind and a new social structure called Ubuntu and contributionism since 2006. And what I find is that there's a 100% level of dissatisfaction with the people that I come face to face with. I've been asking the same question over and over again to all the people in 10 years that I've been talking to and connecting with. And that question is, how many of you are happy with the way the world is going? How many of you are happy with your life? How many of you believe that you're fulfilling your life's dreams? How many of you believe that the governments are doing a great job and serving the people that they're supposed to serve? And in 10 years, I can tell you that not one person has ever put up their hand to say that they are happy with what's going on in the world. So clearly we have a big problem, and we need to find solutions for this problem. And in this series, we're going to look into the past, learn from the ancient civilizations, discover some phenomenal and fascinating knowledge and information, and find a way to put that ancient knowledge to use for humanity into the future. While some of the knowledge and information we're going to find and discover might seem dark and sinister and depressing and quite scary at times, I'd like you to see it differently. I'd like you to see it as liberating and enlightening information that will give us the platform and the foundation to build a new social structure for humanity, a new foundation into the future based on real knowledge and information about the human race and the true history of this planet. So let's start this journey. What are we going to talk about in this series? We're going to talk about origins of humankind, ancient vanished civilization. We're going to talk about the advanced technology, which truly boggles the mind and shows us how little we really know. We're going to talk about gold and this fascination that humanity has had with gold for so many thousands of years, where that fascination comes from, and that we actually inherited this fascination from the gods, that it's not actually our obsession, that it's the obsession of the so-called gods that we inherited as the human race. We're going to talk about astronomy. We're going to talk about geology, archaeology, physics, mathematics, geophysics. We can talk about quantum physics and this thing called laws of nature, and this other interesting area of research called the nature of reality, if we can actually call it that, because we find out how little we really know about the laws of nature and this nature of reality that we find ourselves in. But the key thing that we need to do is, what are we going to do with this information? Because it's very good getting all this knowledge and information, but what do we do with this? If we don't put it to any good use for humanity and our planet and our future, it's all a bloody waste of time. So I suggest that we learn from the ancients, create this platform, and find a solution for this terrible situation that every single one of us finds ourselves in. So we're going to start this journey by connecting the dots and going back into the ancient past, looking back into history, like these famous statues on Easter Island are looking back into the past and into the future, and gain critical information that will allow us to build this platform. When we encounter these ancient civilizations, we find that they seem to have so much more knowledge and information about who we are as a species and our murky ancient history and the origins of humankind. And the one common denominator that I have found is that pretty much all ancient cultures that I've studied all tell us that we come from the stars. And yet that is not what our history books, our modern textbooks tell us. They will deny it until they blue in the face. So let's learn from the ancients. Let's absorb this knowledge and information, and let's give our ancient civilizations the credit they deserve by learning from them. What seems to have become of humanity is that we've become a species with amnesia, because we know nothing about who we are, where we come come from, and why we're here. And this species of amnesia seems to have spread right across the world. No matter where you are, the modern civilization today seems to suffer from the same disease. Now, how do you create a species with amnesia? It seems to me that this final assault on humanity to create a species with amnesia started around 500 years ago, when what I call the thugs from Europe started invading the free lands, the free world, invading the Americas, invading Africa and Asia and the Australias, and started taking control of the land of the native people, invading the land, planting their flags, and destroying all the knowledge that was held by those native people around the world, replacing their books, replacing their literature with Eurocentric history books, Eurocentric religions, and Eurocentric belief systems. And over a 500-year period, very smoothly, very gently, very subtly, and very cunningly created a species with amnesia, of whom we are all members of today. So, who are we? Where do we come from? Why are we here? The great human puzzle, the three questions that most of us have asked ourselves. And we find that when we look into the ancient past, the ancient cultures and civilizations have a lot of critical information for us on those subjects. Because if we don't know who we are and where we come from, how could we possibly think we know where we are going? And it's amazing when you start peeling away the layers of information and the deception through the millennia and the hundreds of years that preceded our current state of disinformation. The Gospel of Thomas is a phenomenal example. And in the Gospel of Thomas, there's an account of the disciples asking Jesus a question. And they ask him, "Tell us how our end will be." And Jesus replies a fascinating answer. He says, "Have you discovered then the beginning, that you look for the end? For where the beginning is, there will be the end. Blessed is he who will take his place in the beginning. He will know the end and will not experience death." Now, when we realize how little we know about our human history, certain things come to mind, and we start to remember that history is written by the victors. The fact that our history books that we are presented with at school and at universities are not really filled with knowledge and information, but is really an agenda that has been written by those that have won the conflicts and won the wars and taken control of our countries and our governments. So, if you talk to somebody that spews forth what they believe is knowledge and information from history books, just ask them, how much do you really know about our human history? And I can tell you that we know less about our human origins than is permissible by the laws of physics. This is a spectacular statement. How can we prove this? And there's a very simple mathematical equation that I'll share with you. But if history is written by the victors, how much do we really know about certain historic events like Alexander the Great? Who was he? What did he really do? All we know about Alexander, that he conquered the world and he invaded countries, raped and pillaged and took over people's lands and homes, and we call him great? Well, I don't think that's a label that deserves to be called great. And for example, the event of the Tower of Babel, how much do we really know about the events that surrounded the Tower of Babel, this famous historic event? We know very little. In fact, the biblical event that talks about the Tower of Babel is completely out of place and out of time, because during the time when Babylon was already an empire and the Tower of Babel was being built, people had already been speaking many languages around the world. So the concept of let us go down and destroy their language, for if they can do this, they can become like us, is a nonsensical statement. Because at that stage, the people were not just speaking one language, they were already speaking many languages. So clearly there's a deep deception encoded into that historic event. So let's continue with this historic expose. And when we go back in history and look at our history books, we learn from recent history that we go further back in time. And suddenly, at one point in time, we stumble upon this very strict dividing line where our history becomes mythology. Well, who decides when history becomes mythology? When does history become mythology? Suddenly, we find that ancient cultures have these gods and these beings that they're fearful of, that they worship, and they bring food to. Well, I can tell you that the Roman gods were not imaginary beings. They were very real to the Romans. They feared them, they worshipped them, they fed them, and they obeyed them. The Greeks didn't think or believe that their gods were mythical or imaginary beings. They were very real to the Greeks, and so were the Sumerians and all other ancient cultures. And we realize that there's a very, very murky dividing line between where history ends and mythology begins. So let's go back some 6,000 years to what we perceive to be the beginning of the current modern civilization, right? To